Hi, this is Siofra's Magic Alcove, and I'm Siofra Bradigan. So today I would like to talk about some of the different types of boundaries that we need to develop and why, and how we can figure out where we're not having effective boundaries and why, that kind of thing. So I was thinking about it as like the different bodies that we have: physical, astral, mental, and spiritual, or spirit. So along those lines, it gives me sort of like a place to start. So physical boundaries seemed fairly obvious. It is how we keep ourselves safe, right? And, a place to stay, to protect ourselves and our body, making sure that we are not around people that are violent, that might hurt our body physically. That is sort of a ground level of what boundaries are all about. How we drive, being in our vehicle, watching for hazards coming towards us, trying to make sure that, we're in a safe environment as far as, like, if we're outdoors, we're not going to stand under a tree when lightning is in the sky, because that actually puts us more at risk. So these are just sort of seems obvious core boundaries. And I think one of the reasons why some people have a hard time being in a safe environment or creating a safe environment for their body is because some of the other boundaries that they have are not working. Emotional and mental boundaries and spiritual boundaries are breaking down. So even though the physical body, here, real life boundary seems like it ought to be obvious, the other boundaries and the other bodies and how we treat ourselves and what we do and so forth seems to affect our ability to protect our physical boundary. Otherwise, if it was that obvious and that simple, why would anyone stay in an abusive relationship and let someone hurt them, beating them up or punching holes in the walls and destroying their environment and that kind of thing? And so, it just gave me some thought-provoking kind of threads, I guess, to follow. So let's continue on, and maybe it'll become more clear as we go. So your astral body is where your feelings and emotions are sort of housed. Let's say that that's the case. And so boundaries associated with protecting your feelings and your emotions, that inner environment, would, if you have good boundaries, that would mean that if someone said something mean, cruel, or vicious to you, undercutting, trying to destroy your sense of who you are, that kind of thing, if those boundaries were effective, then you wouldn't allow yourself to stay with someone who was like that. You wouldn't be around people who were constantly undermining your sense of self or sense of, who you are, what you want to do, your dreams, your ambitions, the things that are close to your heart, the things that you feel that are important to you. Like, yeah, some of the narcissistic and sociopathic trigger behaviors and stuff like that are aimed at undermining that boundary completely. Saying things like you're too sensitive and that kind of stuff. Trying to undermine your confidence in your own intuition, your ability to see things clearly and and follow, what is in your heart kind of thing. So if those things are undermined, then that bleeds down into the physical, where your physical safety is going to be undermined because you can't trust your feelings, your intuition, your heart, your core sense of self and values, the things that are important to you. My mom, when she first met my father, she was an awesome singer, a very good pianist, and one of her ideas was to get into theater and, musical theater, and one of her other interests was wanting to be a nurse and taking care of people. So my father systematically set about, I don't know if he knew he was doing this on purpose or not, I can't tell because I can't think along those lines, but it seems like they're doing it on purpose and have a plan. Undermined her confidence in herself to the point where she wasn't sure that she could actually sing. She was always making excuses about her piano playing ahead of time so that no one would be disappointed in her inability to play the piano, which, was a pretty clear indication of her lack of self-esteem. And that was his goal, was to destroy her self-esteem, so she didn't think she had any power or sensibility or so forth, make her feel stupid. And there were lots of different ways that he did that. And I think most of us have experienced that at least once, if not more than once, from other people who kind of roll their eyes, look at you sideways, or what have you, when you say something. And that's not to say that every time someone questions what you think is going on, that's the goal. They're trying to undermine your self-esteem. Because if you have good self-esteem and you know where those things are coming from, the core of your feelings, what's important to you, and you're settled into that space, if someone questions it, you can explain to them or to yourself why that's important. If it's something else that's just sort of like a theory or a hypothesis or some kind of a odd thought process, then you don't feel threatened by someone questioning it either. It's kind of like it works in both directions. So and knowing who you are and what's important is part of magic and part of spell work and part of shadow work and all of that. I mean, you can't commit to a course of action or a way of being if you have severe doubts or you're constantly being undermined by other people. And so, there's I think one of the ways they try and keep us from doing anything about it is that, you're not being open-minded, or they turn it around somehow and make it a failing of yours, that this is either something that you like and they think it's stupid, or you're not willing to look at the other side of things, so that means you're being unfair, and there's this sort of subconscious training that goes into, especially women, but I'm sure it happens to men as well, that you're always supposed to agree with everybody and never make anyone feel uncomfortable by actually standing up for your own feelings and intuition and so forth. And obviously, you want to be with a person who allows you to have an opinion, a feeling about something. It doesn't have to be something that they like. Like neither Ian nor I are particularly interested in sports. There are some movies I like, he doesn't, and that's fine. I watch those movies by myself, and it's it's not a matter of having to conform when just because we're together. We find things that we really love together to do, but it's okay for us to have separate interests and separate ideas about what's going on, and it doesn't threaten us. And ideally, that's what you want. So, in that case, that's, I think, an example of having a healthy boundary around that. And of course, he likes me for the things that I am passionate about, so, win-win there, as far as it goes. And that's one of the ways to find someone who's compatible, knowing what is really important to you. And if you're with someone who thinks that what's really important to you has no value, you're not the right person to be with. So then you get to the mental body, and that's the realm of thoughts and ideas. So thoughts and ideas are more ephemeral. They don't have as much substance to them, and because of that, they're more manipulatable, because you can entertain a thought or an idea that you may not believe in, just entertain it and see where it goes. And again, that social pressure that somehow we've accumulated of not disagreeing with people or not hearing them out, and that kind of thing. My mother really liked playing devil's advocate. She felt that was an important role for her to play. Whether she agreed with what I said or not, she would always take the opposite stance, which makes it difficult to get to know someone, in my opinion. I don't care for that at all. I want to know who people actually are, not who they're pretending to be for the sake of what's considered some kind of conversational norm, to keep me balanced so that I don't go too far in one direction or another or something like that, I think. And we had, when my father passed, my mother went to the funeral. He died in New Mexico. And she went there, and she was telling me about her going there, to support my sister, one of my sisters, and my brother in what was happening. And, it's like, yeah, right. And I confronted her about it. I just said, you went to make sure he was really dead, didn't you? And she admitted, yes, that was why she was there. Because she, I think, was nervous about admitting that was the reason she went. I mean, also, to be supportive of her children, that could have been a thing. But that wasn't really the main reason she was there for. They were an excuse for her to be there. So she could make sure he really was dead, and confirm it to me and my other sister that indeed we were now safe, because he was not in the physical world anymore. So, but there were like so many different kinds of things like that with my mom. She would take everyone else's side, because apparently she felt they deserved to have representation. So it was very difficult to tell her how I felt or thought about other people or anything, because no matter what I said, or no matter how I felt, she would always come to the defense of the other presumably injured party in the story I was telling that didn't have fair representation for their side of things. And maybe I wasn't thinking about what kind of a day they might be having. So my mom is a good example of how she doesn't have either emotional or mental boundaries, hardly at all. And it's kind of interesting. But I see both of those as ways for the unscrupulous amongst us to manipulate people, using that tendency to not want to ruffle feathers, not want to be seen as unyielding, maybe, being too firm in one camp or another, too certain. And that's ironic to me, because certainly my idea of a progress is to define yourself for who you are as completely as you can. I mean, I don't trust people who are wishy-washy. We had a person in one of our groups at one point who was a peacekeeper, I guess, is what she described herself as. And she had a hard time having an actual opinion about anything because she was always trying to say both sides of the issue constantly. So you never knew where she stood. You only knew where this imaginary line was, and the side on this side of the imaginary line, and then the side on that side of the imaginary line. But in this continuum between these two points of view, where did she sit? So I couldn't trust her. And I used to say things like, the only thing that riding the fence gets is splinters in your butt. It's like people that can't decide that they're on one side or the other and are constantly always seeing both sides are so undefined as to be useless as, well, you can't have a path if you can't choose a position. And choosing a position doesn't mean you don't have the opportunity to change your position or change your mind. I mean, that's the thing. It's like we evolve and change and transform all the time. But if you don't know where you are and where you stand on things, then you can't tell when someone is trying to push you in the wrong direction. And that's what it's about. That's why it's a boundary. Like if I completely and totally disagree with someone, or like say, I can't think of something in particular that would be a good example, but let me give that a little thought. There's plenty of them out there, but not one that seems specific for this purpose. I can think of a few imaginary ones that don't make any sense. Well, let's say something, I like birds. I know I like birds. I like to see them fly. I like to hear them chirp. I don't mind that they poop on things. It's just sort of part of being a bird. And I meet someone who absolutely hates birds. Actually, my second husband was like that. He couldn't see the point of them. It might seem like a small thing. You like birds, you don't like birds, so what? But it says something about the person's overall view of life. And, you know, being in the world, being a part of the world, part of life, and experiencing the world for what it is one of those things that's important to me. It's sort of like a core part of who I am. So being with someone who sees no point in birds and thinks they're just a bunch of stupid pooping machines that no one should ever like, actually is sort of highlighted a huge difference in our perception and experience of reality. And if I had looked just at that and understood the significance of that, we never would have been together. It would be a red flag deal breaker kind of thing. But at the time, I didn't have any boundaries because I was still working through all kinds of stuff, from not being allowed to have boundaries when I was a child. I mean, when I was a kid, I wasn't allowed to choose whether I wanted to give my father a kiss goodnight or not. That was not something I was allowed to decide for myself. I had to do it the way he approved, and it had to be with the right look on my face, the right sound in my voice, and so forth. And I had some nights where it took me up to 50 times before I could kiss my father goodnight in a way that he approved and would then let me go to bed. So that is a pretty clear example of not being permitted to have any emotional boundaries at all. And and it seems pretty clear that it's abusive. It seems clear to me. He thought of it as teaching me the proper respect for his position of authority as my father. And of course, his definition of respect and mine were pretty much not compatible. His idea of respect was the more we feared him, the better. And my idea of respect is something that you earn by being truthful and honest, and someone that you can depend upon, who, when they say something, they mean it, and when they commit to something, they follow through. So that is like another kind of a boundary type of thing. And in the mental sphere of ideas, like NXIVM is a good example of an intellectual cult that took root because of the concept of, I think it was like, you want to be more evolved than other people. You want to be able to think thoughts in a different way. You want to be able to challenge yourself and let go of these mundane human concerns and so forth, and become an intellectual superstar and think in ways that other people haven't. And, we all know where that led, or at least most of us do. NXIVM was a sex cult and abuse, and just serious physical abuse. I mean, cults are a good example of how destroying boundaries is part of that whole process, and that's why boundaries are important. To get to the point where other women are willing to hold you down in order to have, and allowing them, giving them permission to carve some letters with a soldering iron into your flesh in order to prove yourself committed and agree not to eat or sleep or exercise or do anything without someone else's permission. That's giving up all of your boundaries, and it takes a while to get someone to that point. But if you know what your boundaries are to start with, then you can see when someone comes to you and tries to push you in that direction, you can identify it sooner and then avoid the whole process instead of having to go in and discover, oh my God, I'm in a cult and now I have to get out. So it's one of the reasons why I talk about boundaries so much, because self-determination can't happen if you don't have them. So the mental notions that we can come up with, it's like, okay, so here, we went to see an acupuncturist, and he was into a specific Indian guru, who I don't think actually was from India, but regardless of that, it was that type of path. And my husband, being male and more likely to listen to someone's intellectual notions and not necessarily tell people what he thinks about them. Of course, I do that too, but this was more of that. Gave this guy the impression that he was interested when he wasn't. So you can avoid some disappointment on the parts of the person who's trying to pull you into their realm of whatever it is. But yeah, he listens to what the guy said, and I have a tendency to be. I like to listen to what other people think, but I try not to leave them with the impression that I think they're right. I don't know, maybe I do to a certain extent, because sometimes it's not necessary. They're not really a part of your life, and they're just sort of a passing little thing that went by. But anyway. And then the spiritual boundaries are a huge one. And I've been thinking a lot about that. I'm thinking about the lack of differences that I see between the New Age awareness, the ascension idea, coming from other planets or star systems. I don't see the difference at the core of the story between that and when we die we get to go to heaven and things are better when things are gone. It's a whole different subject, really, but it's similar in that sense, because there's all that out there right now, and when someone presents you with that kind of an idea, you have to decide for yourself whether it makes sense. To me, it doesn't make sense, because I think that we're here, and accepting being here and becoming a part of this biosphere and being human and making this world and the wonderful diversity and sacredness and whatever that's there a part of what I'm about now, and not like waiting for something up in the sky, be it an alien race or a god form, to come and save us all. It's like, I figure we need to save ourselves or it's not going to happen. And we'd be in a better power position if we actually save ourselves than if we actually let someone else save us, just from a psychological point of view. But, that's defining your spirituality and what you believe in, and looking at it and seeing, does it give you healthy boundaries? Can you feel the edges of who you are in your belief system, or are you trying to become something you're not? There's a lot of different belief systems. They seem to be all about trying to transform you from who you actually are as a human being, flawed and confused and overwhelmed sometimes, as we all are, to rise above that, become something more pure, more perfect, or what have you, and in that process subsume and get rid of the things about being a person that we've decided aren't okay or don't work or something like that. Like anger is a big one that most spiritual paths try to get rid of. And anger is a normal human emotion. This desire to be better than what we are is a big thing. I was hooked into that with my first husband. He used my desire to be, perfect or evolved or whatever the heck the catchphrase is now, to put me in positions where, as a normal person, I would not be comfortable. And if you don't let yourself be uncomfortable in those abnormal positions, then you have failed, and it just sets up this whole weird psychological loop thing in your head. With him, one of the things was not being jealous, for example. That jealousy was a base emotion, somehow not worthy of an evolved person. Therefore, he had sex with other women in my bed and had me watch, and then was disappointed when I didn't have the appropriate reaction of, yay, this is great. It's not me. I don't know if it is anyone else, but it's definitely not me. But to make me somehow a failure because I didn't meet this artificial standard that he was setting, which tagged into that desire in me and my subconscious to, if only I was perfect, everything would work out. So it was a great manipulation ploy on his part. I mean, he figured what my weaknesses were pretty easily. Of course, he was a good sociopath and a psychopath. And so that was his whole thing. That's all he did, was study people's weaknesses and figure out how to manipulate them and whatnot. And I was just out of my childhood, which was not a very good training ground for becoming an individual, as we know. So, spiritual boundaries are extremely important, and you definitely don't want to just give that over to any idea that comes along. It's not good to do that, because each one of them is going to have all their own traps, I guess, of processes or whatever, in order to get you to become a part of their stream of energy. And once you sort of fall into that stream, it's sometimes difficult to get out. Trying to speak in general terms as much as possible, because I know we're all on different paths and we're all doing different things, and of course finding your own path is what I'm all about, whatever that happens to be, because no one can decide that but you. But that's the thing. Are you? Are you deciding that? Or are you falling for someone's palaver? I mean, I ran into a approved reader on a group the other day that declared that he had been created before the beginning of any universe, that he had lived trillions upon trillions of lives, and that he had been in, like, reincarnated in 10,801 or something like that universes. I'm like, okay, how can you prove those stats? I'd like to know. I'm like, you can't. You cannot disprove anything this person has said, although I'm pretty sure it's a bunch of bull hockey, that it's not true. For one thing, something that was created before the existence of anything, why is this person here? And I'm imagining in my mind, if I confront this individual about this, they're going to say, you're just not evolved enough to understand what I'm all about, and I'm here to help you learn that and let go of these antiquated notions and ideas that you have about reality. I'm like, so I don't see the point in even asking the question. But, you know, it's like, that's my gut and all of my instincts and all of my boundaries. And I see something like that and I'm like, yep, nope, stay away. Not even going there. I don't see the point. If that makes me closed-minded, I'm closed-minded. I don't think it does. I think it just makes me discerning. And we've talked about discernment before. You have to be thoughtful, and you have to think through the process of whatever it is somebody is suggesting that you do, and what are its natural consequences. Are they empowering? Do they empower you to become more of who you are? Do they empower you to trust yourself and your own instincts? Do they empower you to be a better person without having to give everything away? You know, it's like, it isn't about sacrifice and martyrdom. It doesn't have to be. There's nothing wrong with helping other people, helping a person that's in need if you choose you want to. I do that. There's nothing wrong with it. But it isn't the requirement in order to be able to succeed as a spiritual being, I don't think. I think the idea of being here is to enjoy it as much as we can in a way that serves our greater good. And if we're serving our greater good, then by extension, the greater good of those around us will also be served. Because if you have to twist yourself up in a pretzel, become some kind of strange nth dimension not person, who are you serving? Interesting question. So I just wanted to put it out there that boundaries aren't just about, there's a complex subject. Boundaries cover a lot of things. And I thought by putting it into the language of, your physical body, your emotional body, your mental body, and your spirit body, it might help us to sort of determine what were things that might be where we need to shore up our boundaries and make our own decisions and decide who we are. I think it's fine if we never join a group of any kind whatsoever. You don't really need the validation of any other being in the universe when it comes right down to it. If you feel in yourself that you are doing your path, you're becoming yourself, even if 99% of the people in the world think you're crazy, that doesn't mean you are. That's why I talk to trees more than I do people. They make more sense to me. They don't have an agenda. Except, wanting to grow and have some sunshine and house some birds and, things like that. Those kind of agendas I'm okay with. They don't have like an ego agenda trying to prove something to themselves or fill a hole that they have in their own psyche that they can't fill on their own, so they're shoving other people in it and sucking out their energy and their souls and so forth in order to fill this gap that can't be filled that way. But yeah. Anyway. So, I guess that's enough on this particular subject. I'm sure we'll have some great conversations about this. So, this has been Siofra's Magic Alcove, and I'm Siofra Bradigan. Blessed day.